Hi, and welcome to English Channel. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
1. Introduction. Long ago, in a land many people call the Holy Land, 3 great religions share the same space. Today, this land is at the center of a long and painful conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Many people think it is only about religion, but it is also about land and the right to choose their own future. For more than 100 years, both sides have wanted the same place to be their home. Because of this, tension is always high. Small events can quickly turn into violence. Like a ticking time bomb, the situation can change at any moment. This story will help you understand why this conflict began and why it is still not over today. 2. Early history and ancient roots. 1000 BC, 1800. About 3,000 years ago, the story of this land began with the Jewish people. Around 1000 BC, King David ruled a kingdom here. 4 Jewish people. This land became their ancient home and a place full of meaning. They built temples and lived there for many generations. But history was not always peaceful. In the 1st century AD, the Romans destroyed an important temple in Jerusalem. Many Jews were forced to leave their land. This time is called the diaspora, when Jewish people lived in many different countries. Even so, they always remembered their homeland. In the 7th century, Arab people came to this land and brought Islam. Over time, they built new communities and cities. The land became important not only to Jews, but also to Muslims and Christians. Jerusalem became a holy city for all 3 religions. From the 1500s to the early 1900s, the area was part of the Ottoman Empire. During this long time, different groups lived together. Life was not perfect, but there was often peace. People worked, traded, and shared the land. At that time, people cared more about daily life than about having their own nation. 3. The rise of Zionism and Britain's promises, 1880 to 1920. In the late 1800s, many Jewish people in Europe faced discrimination and violence. They did not feel safe. Because of this, a new idea began. It was called Zionism. This movement wanted to create a homeland for Jewish people in their ancient land. Many Jews started to move to Palestine to build a new life. At the same time, Arab people were already living there and saw it as their home. As more people arrived, tensions slowly grew between the 2 groups. During World War I, Britain wanted support from both Arabs and Jews. So, it made promises to both sides. Britain said it would support Arab independence. But in 1917, it also gave the Balfour Declaration. This statement supported a national home for Jewish people in Palestine. These promises were not clear and did not match each other. After the war, the Ottoman Empire ended, and Britain took control of the land. Now, both Jews and Arabs believed the land should belong to them. This created a serious problem that would grow in the future. 4. The British Mandate and rising tensions, 1920 to 1947. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire ended, and Britain took control of Palestine. This time is called the British Mandate. Britain had the job of managing the land and preparing it for the future. However, this task was very difficult. During this period, many Jewish people moved to Palestine. They came from Europe, where they faced discrimination and violence. In the 1930s and 1940s, the situation became much worse because of the Holocaust. Millions of Jews were killed, and many survivors were looking for a safe place to live. Palestine became a place of hope for them. At the same time, Arab people were already living on this land. They saw the growing number of Jewish immigrants as a serious threat. They feared losing their homes and their future. Because of this, tension between the two groups grew quickly. From 1936 to 1939, a large uprising took place. This was known as the Arab Revolt. Arab groups protested against British rule and Jewish immigration. There were strikes, attacks, and strong responses from British forces. Many people were killed, and the situation became even more tense. Britain tried to control the violence, but it failed to bring peace. Both sides became more divided and less willing to trust each other. By the end of this period, the conflict was much deeper and more dangerous. 5. The UN Partition Plan and the War of 1948, 1947 to 1949. By 1947, Britain could no longer manage the situation. It decided to leave and gave the problem to the United Nations. The UN suggested a plan to divide the land into two countries, one for Jewish people and one for Arab people. Jerusalem would be controlled internationally. This plan was called Resolution 181. Jewish leaders accepted the plan, even though they did not get all the land they wanted. They saw it as a chance to build their own country. However, Arab leaders rejected the plan. They believed it was unfair because Arabs were the majority at that time. Soon after, violence broke out. In 1948, Jewish leaders declared the independence of Israel. This led to a war between Israel and several Arab countries. Fighting spread quickly across the region. In the end, Israel won the war and gained more land than the UN had planned. For Palestinians, this was a time of great loss. Around 700,000 people lost their homes or were forced to leave. This event is called the Nakba, which means catastrophe. Many Palestinians became refugees and lived in camps or in nearby countries. They lost their homes and their sense of safety. The events of 1948 changed the region forever. The conflict became deeper, and the pain from this time is still felt today. 6. The rise of the PLO and the Six-Day War, 1964 to 1967. In 1964, a new group was created to represent the Palestinian people. It was called the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO. The main goal of the PLO was to create an independent Palestinian state. Many Palestinians supported this idea because they wanted their own country and control over their future. The PLO also wanted to bring together Palestinians who were living in different places, including refugees in nearby countries. At that time, tension in the region was already very high. Israel had difficult relationships with its neighboring Arab countries, including Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. There were many small conflicts, border clashes, and strong political disagreements. Each side feared the other and prepared for a possible war. In June 1967, war suddenly broke out. This conflict is known as the Six-Day War because it lasted only 6 days. Even though the war was short, it changed the region in a very big way. Israel fought against several Arab countries at the same time. In a very short period, Israel won the war and gained control of large areas of land. After the war, Israel controlled the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. These areas had large Palestinian populations. This marked the beginning of a new period in the conflict. Now, many Palestinians were living under Israeli control. For Israel, the war was seen as a victory and a way to increase security, but for Palestinians and many Arab countries, it was a serious loss. The result of the war created new problems and made the conflict even more complex. 7. Occupation and the First Intifada, 1967 to 1993. After 1967, life changed greatly for Palestinians living in the occupied areas. More than 1 million Palestinians were now under Israeli military control. They had limited freedom in many parts of their daily lives. Travel, work, and movement were often controlled by military rules. Over time, Israeli settlements began to grow in these areas. These were communities where Israeli citizens moved to live. Palestinians saw these settlements as a loss of their land. This created more anger and frustration. Many Palestinians felt that their future was becoming more uncertain. For many years, tension continued to grow slowly. People on both sides felt fear and mistrust. There were small protests and acts of resistance, but there was no large uprising yet. However, the situation was like pressure building over time. In 1987, this pressure finally exploded. A major uprising began. This event is known as the First Intifada. The word Intifada means shaking off. It was a movement where Palestinians protested against Israeli control. The Intifada was different from a traditional war. It was mostly made up of protests, strikes, and civil resistance. Many young people joined demonstrations in the streets. Some threw stones, while others refused to work or cooperate with authorities. It became a powerful symbol of resistance. Israel responded with military force to control the situation. This led to many clashes between soldiers and protesters. Many people were injured, and many lives were lost during these years. The First Intifada lasted until the early 1990s. It brought global attention to the Palestinian situation. People around the world began to see the daily struggles of Palestinians more clearly. At the same time, the Intifada also showed that the conflict could not be solved by force alone. Both sides started to realize that a political solution might be necessary. This period helped open the door for future peace talks, even though true peace was still far away. 8. Fragile hope from the Oslo Accords, 1993 to 2000. In the early 1990s, something new began. After many years of conflict, leaders from Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization decided to talk. Secret meetings took place in Norway. In 1993, both sides signed an important agreement called the Oslo Accords. For the first time, they recognized each other and agreed to work toward peace. This moment gave people hope. Many believed that the long conflict could finally end. As part of the agreement, a new government was created. It was called the Palestinian Authority, or PA. This group was given limited control over parts of the West Bank and Gaza. Palestinians could now manage some of their own daily affairs, such as education and local services. At first, life began to change in small ways. There were fewer clashes, and people felt a sense of possibility. Leaders spoke about a future with two states, one for Israelis and one for Palestinians. It seemed that peace was closer than ever before. However, this hope was very fragile. Not everyone supported the peace process. On both sides, there were groups that strongly opposed the agreement. Some believed that giving up land or sharing control was a mistake. Violence soon returned. There were attacks by extremist groups, including suicide bombings against Israeli civilians. At the same time, Israeli settlements in the occupied areas continued to grow. Palestinians saw this as a sign that the land for their future state was becoming smaller. In 1995, a shocking event made the situation even worse. The Israeli Prime Minister, who supported the peace process, was assassinated by a man who opposed the agreement. This event deeply affected both sides and slowed down the peace efforts. As the years passed, trust between Israelis and Palestinians became weaker again. Talks continued, but progress was slow. By the end of the 1990s, many people felt disappointed. The dream of peace was still alive, but it was fading. 9. The Second Intifada and Internal Division, 2000 to 2007. In 2000, leaders met again to try to reach a final agreement. These talks took place at Camp David in the United States. However, the discussions failed. Both sides could not agree on important issues such as borders, Jerusalem, and refugees. Soon after, a new wave of violence began. This was called the Second Intifada. It was much more violent than the first one. There were many attacks, including bombings, shootings, and military operations. Fear spread quickly among civilians on both sides. Daily life became dangerous and uncertain. Israel increased its military actions in the West Bank and Gaza. It also built barriers and checkpoints to control movement. Palestinians faced more restrictions in their daily lives. At the same time, militant groups carried out attacks inside Israel. The level of violence was very high during these years. In 2005, Israel made a major decision. It withdrew its soldiers and settlers from the Gaza Strip. This was seen by some as a step toward reducing tension. However, the situation did not become peaceful. In 2006, elections were held among Palestinians. A group called Hamas won the election in Gaza. Hamas had a different approach from Fatah, another major Palestinian group. This led to serious disagreements between them. By 2007, the conflict between Hamas and Fatah turned into fighting. Hamas took control of Gaza, while Fatah remained in control of parts of the West Bank. This created a division within Palestinian leadership. After Hamas took control of Gaza, Israel placed a strict blockade on the area. Movement of people and goods became very limited. Life in Gaza became very difficult, with economic problems and shortages of basic needs. This period showed that the conflict was not only between Israelis and Palestinians, but also within Palestinian society itself. The division made peace even harder to achieve and the region entered another long and difficult chapter. 10. The tragedy of October 7th, 2023, and a devastating war. On October 7th, 2023, a sudden and shocking attack changed everything. Fighters from Hamas crossed into Israel and carried out a large and coordinated assault. They attacked towns and communities, killing around 1,200 people. Many of the victims were civilians. During the attack, about 250 people were taken as hostages and brought into Gaza. Families were separated, and fear spread quickly across the country. This event deeply shocked Israel and the world. For many Israelis, it was one of the most painful days in their recent history. People felt unsafe, and there was strong pressure on the government to respond. Soon after, Israel launched a large military operation in Gaza. The goal was to destroy Hamas and bring back the hostages. Air strikes began, followed by ground operations. The fighting quickly became intense and destructive. Gaza, a small and crowded area, suffered heavy damage. Buildings, roads, hospitals, and schools were affected. As the war continued, the human cost grew very high. By early 2026, more than 70,000 Palestinians had lost their lives, including many women and children. Thousands more were injured. Many families lost their homes and were forced to move again and again to find safety. At the same time, the hostages remained a major concern. Some were released during temporary agreements, but many families continued to wait and hope for the return of their loved ones. Their pain and uncertainty became a symbol of the tragedy on both sides. The situation in Gaza became a severe humanitarian crisis. There were shortages of food, clean water, and medical supplies. Hospitals struggled to treat the wounded. Many people lived without electricity or safe shelter. International organizations warned that the conditions were becoming unbearable. This war showed how quickly violence can grow and how deeply it can affect ordinary people. It also made the conflict even more difficult to solve, as anger and grief increased on both sides. 11. The current situation, peace plans and division, 2025 to 2026. By the end of 2025, there were new efforts to stop the violence. Under the leadership of United States President Donald Trump, a new Gaza peace plan was introduced. The plan called for a ceasefire and the release of hostages. It also aimed to reduce violence and create a path toward rebuilding Gaza. At first, this plan brought a small sense of hope. Some hostages were released, and fighting slowed down in certain areas. Leaders spoke again about the possibility of peace, even though trust was still very low. In January 2026, the second phase of the plan began. This stage focused on rebuilding Gaza. There were discussions about restoring homes, hospitals, and basic services. International support was promised to help people recover from the war. However, the situation remained very fragile. Small attacks and clashes continued. Even though large battles became less common, violence did not fully stop. Many people still lived in fear, unsure about what would happen next. The economy in Palestinian areas was also in very bad condition. Jobs were lost, businesses were destroyed, and daily life became extremely difficult. Many families depended on aid to survive. The road to recovery looked long and uncertain. At the same time, political divisions remained strong. Different groups had different ideas about the future. This made it harder to create a clear and stable plan for peace. Today, the conflict is still not fully resolved. There are moments of calm, but also moments of tension. The events of recent years have left deep scars on both sides. The future remains unclear. Peace is still possible, but it will require trust, cooperation, and strong effort from all sides. Until then, the region continues to live between hope and uncertainty. 12. Conclusion, lessons, and personal view. This long and painful story teaches us an important lesson. Violence often creates more violence. When people use force again and again, the conflict becomes deeper and harder to stop. Long periods of control and occupation do not bring true safety. Instead, they create anger, fear, and a cycle of hate that can last for generations. In my view, this conflict is not only about land or politics. It is also a moral challenge for humanity. Real peace cannot exist only on maps or borders. It must begin with respect for human life and dignity. Both sides need to accept that the other has the right to exist, live, and have a future. Peace is not easy and it will take time. But it can only begin when people stop seeing each other as enemies. When both sides choose understanding over hate, a new future can slowly start.